Hello, everyone. Before we dive in, be sure to drop your thoughts, feelings, and lessons in the comments below. Like the video and subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Let's get into it. The cruelest thing my wife, Maylise Royster, ever said to me wasn't that she was unhappy. It was the way she said it like a verdict, like my effort had already been weighed and found worthless. We were standing in our kitchen in Prince George's County, Maryland, the kind with a fridge covered in school flyers and a calendar I kept updating like it still mattered. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked at me with flat, practiced confidence and said, "You couldn't lead a home if I handed you a map. Here's how it happened. My name is Kellen Royster. I'm not flashy. I'm not loud. I'm the kind of man who believed stability was a language of love, paid bills, consistent routines, showing up even when I was tired. Maylise and I built our life the slow way. We met in Landover at a community fundraiser, ended up talking past the closing time, and I remember thinking she was the first person who made ambition sound gentle. We married young enough to still believe effort automatically earned respect. We had our son, Jason, and for a while I thought we were building something solid. The shift didn't arrive like a thunderclap. It arrived like a drip you ignore until the ceiling stains. Maylise started correcting me in front of people, then laughing like it was a joke I was too sensitive to understand. If I said we should cut back on eating out, she'd say I was counting pennies like a scare man. If I asked about a charge I didn't recognize, she'd call it control. If I suggested counseling, she'd tilt her head and say, "A counselor can't give you a backbone." And because she said everything with that calm tone, it was hard to prove it was cruelty. It sounded like confidence. It sounded like she had already decided who I was. What made it worse was how quickly her family turned into a chorus. Her mother, Renita Lark, lived in Bowie and had a way of smiling without warmth. She'd look at our living room like she was inspecting a rental property. Her sister, Tashi Lark, in Baltimore, stayed on speakerphone like she lived inside our marriage. Her brother, Vontae Lark, treated my home like a place he could check on. They started repeating Maylise's line, "Kellen can't lead," like it was a family motto. Every time I tried to set a boundary, I became the villain in the story they were writing. The first time I realized Maylise wasn't just venting was at a cookout in Northeast DC. Somebody asked how married life was going, and I said, lighthearted, that we were figuring out schedules with JC in school and my shifts. Maylise smiled, leaned into the conversation like she was offering a fun fact, and said, "Kellen is good at working, but leading? That man would get lost in his own driveway." People laughed, not cruelly, just enough to make it feel normal. Renita laughed the loudest. I laughed too, because that's what you do when you're trying not to look wounded. But inside, something went quiet. Not anger, just a cold understanding. She enjoyed shrinking me. After that, the disrespect became organized. If I tried to talk about budgets, she'd wait until we were around her family, then bring it up like I was being unreasonable. "He wants to audit everything," she'd say, making quotation marks with her fingers. If I asked for help with bedtime, she'd say I was overwhelmed in front of Jason, like my son needed to know his father couldn't handle life. When the school sent home notices about attendance and volunteer days, Maylise would tell people she was carrying everything while I checked out. I'd be the one doing homework, packing lunches, coordinating carpool texts. Yet somehow her story landed better than my reality because she told it first and told it loudly. Jason noticed. Kids always notice. He started asking Maylise before he asked me. If he wanted permission to do something, he'd glance at her first like she was the only authority that mattered. If I said no, he'd look confused, like I was stepping out of my role. I tried not to blame him. He was learning what he heard. But it hurt in a way I couldn't explain without sounding weak. It is a specific kind of pain to watch your own child start treating you like you're temporary in your own home. That I did what men like me do when the floor disappears under us. I worked harder. Earlier mornings, later nights, extra shifts. I packed lunches like I was packing proof. I cleaned the kitchen twice because it was the one room she liked to judge. I tried to be calmer, steadier, more patient. Like if I could become perfect enough, she'd have to stop calling me incapable. But Maylise didn't want perfection. She wanted exhaustion. She wanted me so busy proving myself that I didn't notice what she was building behind my back. The abandonment started showing up as boundaries. She'd take the car and leave me scrambling, then say she was protecting her peace. She'd cancel plans with my family and call it prioritizing wellness. She'd withhold affection like it was a reward system, and if I looked hurt, she'd say, "This is why you can't lead. You're too emotional." I began sleeping on the edge of the bed like a guest. Some nights her phone would light up, and she'd roll over with the screen, turn away from me, thumb moving fast, face blank like she was paying a bill. I wasn't perfect. I had days where I was tired and short. I had moments where I shut down instead of explaining myself. But I wasn't what she kept calling me either. I wasn't unstable. I wasn't irresponsible. I wasn't a man drifting through life. The problem was that I kept trying to defend myself in conversations she had already rigged. She didn't debate. She performed, and her family applauded. I started realizing I wasn't in an argument. I was in a trial where she was building a case, and I was the defendant who kept talking without representation. The first case-building move I caught was small, almost invisible. Our lease renewal for the townhouse came up, and I saw an email thread with the property manager. Maylis had written that she'd be taking over communication because I was unreliable with details. She tried to add her mother as an emergency contact and asked whether the lease could be modified if one party moves out. It was the kind of message that sounds innocent, unless you live in the home and know you never agreed to any of it. When I asked her about it, she shrugged and said, "I'm just being responsible since you don't handle things." Then the money started moving in patterns. At first it looked like regular spending, grocery runs, gas, little purchases that add up. But I noticed a rhythm. Within hours of my paycheck hitting our joint account, there would be transfers out, sometimes to her personal account, sometimes to a Cash App name I didn't recognize, sometimes labeled as gift. When I brought it up, she laughed. "It's our money," she said, like the conversation was childish. When I pushed for clarity, she flipped it. "So you're tracking me now? That's scary." And just like that, my attempt to understand became her proof that I was controlling. The next move came through the school portal. JCN's elementary school in Hyattsville used an online system for emergency contacts, pickup permissions, attendance notes. I logged in one evening to check an event date and saw my name moved lower on the pickup list. Not removed, just demoted. Renita's name was added and Vani's. The preferred contact was switched to Mayli's phone. It wasn't illegal. It was strategic. It meant if anything happened, if there was an emergency, a schedule change, a conflict, she could claim she was the default parent and I was secondary. When I asked her about it, she said, "You don't even notice those things." I had to fix it. I stopped arguing after that. Not because I agreed, because I finally understood she wasn't trying to be right. She was trying to be believable. And if she was building believability, I needed to do something I'd never done in my life. I needed receipts. The word felt dramatic when I first thought it, like something people say online. But I wasn't preparing for online. I was preparing for courtrooms, custody schedules, bank statements, and a world that doesn't care how sincere you sound if you can't prove what happened. I got quiet in a way that scared me at first. I started documenting the things nobody thinks to document until it's too late. I saved texts where Maylis told Tashi she was setting me up to look unstable. I screenshot the transfer history. I turned on bank alerts and saved every notification. I forwarded the lease emails to an account Maylis didn't know existed. I kept a written log, dates, times, who said what, who was present. It felt paranoid until I realized it wasn't paranoia if it was true. It was preparation. The twist I didn't expect came from Maylis herself. Her arrogance made her careless. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the bed. I wasn't digging. It lit up on its own, bright enough for me to see the preview. The message wasn't romantic. It was logistical. It was from a contact saved as RL, Renita's initials. It said, "Did you get him to sign the papers yet?" Under it, another text. "Remember, don't argue. Get him tired. Make it about peace." My stomach turned cold because it confirmed what I couldn't prove before. The cruelty wasn't random. It was coordinated. I didn't touch her phone. I didn't need to. The preview was enough to change how I moved. I stopped reacting. I started watching. I paid attention to the moments Renita pushed Maylis to escalate, Small comments like, "A real man wouldn't need reminders." The way Renita praised Maylis for standing her ground whenever I looked drained. The way Vontae would ask questions that sounded harmless but weren't. "You still on the same shift? You still got that overtime?" Information gathering, like they were planning around my life. 2 weeks later, Maylis brought home a folder and acted casual. She said it was just paperwork for insurance updates and adult stuff I always avoided. She smiled while she said it, like the story was already set. Kellen doesn't handle details. Maylis saves the family. She opened the folder at the kitchen counter and slid a page toward me with a pen. The page was labeled like something harmless, authorization, but the language was dense. I didn't sign. I said I'd read it first. Her face changed for half a second, just a flicker. Then she laughed and said, "See, you can't even make a simple decision." That night, after she fell asleep, I read the document carefully. It wasn't just an authorization. It was a power of attorney, limited but dangerous. It would have allowed Maylis to manage financial affairs if I was deemed unable, including interacting with banks and property managers. The wording was slippery, the kind designed to look reasonable while opening doors you can't easily close. I sat at the table staring at it, hearing Renita's voice in my head. "Get him tired." I realized this wasn't only about divorce. It was about control before divorce. It was about setting the board, so I'd lose before the game started. The next morning, I made a call from my car in the parking lot of a grocery store in Upper Marlboro. I searched quietly and found a family law attorney named Adrienne Pike. Her office was small, professional, nothing flashy. When she answered, her tone was calm in a way that made me feel like I could breathe. I told her I didn't want drama. I wanted clarity. She said something I'll never forget. "Clarity isn't a feeling, Mr. Royster. It's documentation." I didn't tell Maylis. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't even tell my brother. I just made the appointment and showed up. Adrienne didn't act shocked by my story. She acted prepared. She asked for dates, accounts, screenshots, names. She asked what I wanted. Not revenge, not punishment, but a livable outcome. I said, "I want my son safe and stable." She nodded and explained the difference between feeling mistreated and proving a pattern. "If she's building a narrative," Adrienne said, "we build a timeline." She told me to keep my behavior consistent and my documentation clean. No yelling, no threats, no messy texts. "Let her be the loud one," she said. "You be the accurate one." The first step was quiet. I opened a new account at a bank Maylis didn't use. I changed my direct deposit. I didn't empty the joint account overnight like a villain. I moved responsibly, legally, enough to protect my paycheck while still paying household bills. Adrienne coached me on how to do it without making it look like financial punishment. The second step was safety. I took pictures of important documents, birth certificates, social security cards, insurance info, then stored copies securely. The third step was routine. I started living like every normal day might someday be. Described in a courtroom. Maylis felt the shift, even though she didn't know what it was. She escalated. When she couldn't get me to argue, she tried to get me to look unstable in other ways. She started baiting me in front of people. Renita would come over and make comments about my parenting while Jason listened. "Does Kellen even know his teacher's name?" she'd ask, smiling like it was a joke. Maylis would laugh and say, "You know he doesn't." Then she'd look at me like she was waiting for the explosion. I stayed calm. I answered softly, with facts, and I watched their faces tighten when I didn't give them the scene they wanted. The next twist came through my job. I worked operations for a distribution company in Capitol Heights, the kind of place where showing up on time matters more than charm. One afternoon, my supervisor pulled me aside and said HR received an anonymous concern that I was dealing with emotional issues at home that might affect safety. The wording was careful, like someone had Googled how to sound official. My throat went dry. I asked for details. They couldn't give me much. Anonymous reports are like that. But the timing wasn't random. It was right after Maylis had threatened me the night before, saying, "If you try to leave, I'll make sure people see what you really are." I didn't panic. I documented. I wrote down the date, time, who spoke to me, what was said. Then I emailed myself a summary. Adrienne told me to be proactive without being defensive. I requested a meeting with HR, provided a calm statement, and asked what steps I could take to reassure them. No drama, no accusations. That approach mattered. It kept my workplace from becoming Maylee's playground, and it created another proof point. While she was trying to pay me unstable, I was handling my life with measured control. At home, Maylee's tried a new tactic. She started calling my calmness cold. She told friends I was checked out, that I refused to communicate. She framed my silence as cruelty. She'd stand in the kitchen, arms folded, and say loud enough for Jason to hear, "This is why you can't lead. You disappear." And because I wasn't defending myself out loud, people could believe her. That was the hardest part, watching my reputation bend while I kept my mouth shut. But Adrian warned me, people's opinions are not the battlefield. Custody is. One evening in Bowie, Renita hosted a family dinner. She sat Maylees at the head of the table like a queen. Vonne kept asking about my schedule, my pay and my plans. Tashi was on video call, laughing at little comments like they were inside jokes. At some point, Renita leaned toward me and said, "A household needs a strong leader. Some men were not raised for that." She smiled like she'd offered wisdom. Maylees looked pleased. I chewed my food slowly and said, "A household needs consistency." Renita's smile tightened. She wanted to fight. I gave her a sentence. Later that night, Maylees started an argument anyway. She accused me of acting superior at her mother's. She said I embarrassed her. I stayed calm and asked, "What do you want from me?" She said, "I want you to stop pretending you're in control." Then she said something that made my hands go cold. "I already have what I need. People know who you are." I didn't answer. I wrote it down afterward. Because statements like that aren't just insults, they're admissions of intent. The money pattern got worse. I started noticing charges that weren't household needs, large purchases, random withdrawals, transfers to names that meant nothing to me. One transfer in particular caught my attention, a payment labeled retainer. Not huge, but clear. When I asked Maylees directly if she had hired an attorney, she smirked and said, "Why? Are you scared?" Then she turned to Jason and said, "Your dad gets nervous when adults handle things." Jason laughed uncertainly, like he didn't know what the joke was but knew he was supposed to smile. I felt something heavy settle in my chest. She was using our child as a mirror to shame me. Adrian told me to keep building the timeline. So I did. I kept screenshots of the school portal changes. I saved the bank records. I documented every time Maylees kept Jason from my family without reason. I kept the voice notes she left when she was confident, especially the ones where she said things like, "You will not leave me looking stupid." And then came the voice note that turned my stomach. Maylees laughing, saying, "If he leaves, I'll make sure he leaves with nothing." Not anger, not grief, amusement. Like my life was a game, and she was already rehearsing the win. The real twist, the one that connected everything, was the house. We didn't own a big place, but we had equity and a clean record. One afternoon, I found a letter from the county about a property record inquiry. It wasn't a foreclosure notice. It was a standard confirmation request, the kind that looks harmless unless you've been paying attention. Adrian had me pull the property records, and there it was, an attempted filing, rejected for a technical reason, requesting a change to mailing address and adding an authorized contact. The name listed as authorized contact was Renita Lark, Maylee's mother. That wasn't a mistake. That was a plan. Adrian explained it plainly. They're trying to redirect information, delay your awareness, and create the appearance that her family manages the property. She told me to freeze certain changes, update security measures with the county where possible, and keep every piece of correspondence. Maylees, meanwhile, acted like nothing was happening. She kept repeating the "can't lead" line whenever she wanted to feel powerful. She'd say it in the hallway. She'd say it with friends over. She'd say it while scrolling her phone, like she was narrating my failure for her own enjoyment. The day the separation became real wasn't dramatic. It was quiet in the worst way. Maylees came home late, walked past me like I was furniture, and said she needed space. I asked where she was going. She said, "Somewhere peaceful." Then she added, without looking up from her phone, "Don't start with your emotions. You can't lead and you can't handle pressure." Jason was in his room, but he could hear her tone. I felt my body want to react. Anger, pleading something. Instead, I breathed, told her I'd continue caring for Jacian, and went to wash dishes. I could feel her frustration that I didn't chase. Over the next week, she started disappearing more often. Boundaries, she called it. She'd take the car and leave me stranded, then tell people I was dependent. She'd ignore Jacian's bedtime while claiming she was mentally exhausted. I handled school mornings, dinner, homework, laundry. When I asked her to coordinate schedules, she said, "You want a gold star for being a dad?" The cruelty wasn't loud. It was surgical. It targeted the part of me that still wanted approval. And the more I stopped asking for approval, the meaner she got, like she needed to get a reaction to feel like she still controlled the room. Then Maylis tried to force a scene. She accused me, out loud, in front of Renita, of hiding money. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was upside down. She was the one draining and transferring, yet she was accusing me first to plant the idea. Adrian had warned me about that too. The person doing harm often accuses first. It makes the truth look like retaliation. I kept my voice calm and said, "All spending can be reviewed." Renita rolled her eyes and said, "Listen." To him. He thinks he's a lawyer. Maylis smirked like she'd won something. The court filing came soon after. Maylis filed for separation with claims that I was financially abusive, emotionally unstable, and incapable of leading the home. She requested primary custody. She requested support. She requested restrictions on my access, framed as safety. When I read the paperwork, my hand shook, not from fear of being exposed, but from the shock of seeing lies presented in formal language. It looked official. It looked believable. And for a moment, I understood how men get crushed by narratives they didn't realize were being written. Then I remembered my folder. My timeline. My receipts. The weeks before court were heavy. Maylis played sweet in public and ruthless in private. She'd tell friends she was trying to co-parent peacefully while texting me insults. She'd make a show of taking Jacian to a park once, then tell the court she was his primary caretaker. She'd ask me to cover an expense, then claim I controlled all money. She kept baiting me for a reaction that would validate her claims. I stayed measured. I communicated through short, calm messages. I kept everything, because I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was protecting my son's stability. The hardest night was when Jacian asked me, quietly, if I was leaving because I couldn't lead. Kids repeat what they hear when they don't understand it. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He was trying to make sense of the tension. I sat with him on the couch and told him, a leader doesn't shout, and a leader doesn't insult. A leader keeps you safe. He nodded like he wanted to believe it. Then he asked if Maylis was mad at him. That question broke something in me, because whatever game Maylis thought she was playing, it was reaching our child. And I realized my quiet plan wasn't just self-respect, it was damage control. Court day came in Hyattsville under gray winter light. The courthouse didn't look dramatic. It looked like paperwork made into a building, metal detectors, quiet hallways, people carrying folders like their lives were inside. Maylis showed up confident. Hair neat, outfit sharp, Renita and Vontae behind her like backup singers. Tashi was on speakerphone in the hallway, giving Maylis last-minute encouragement like it was a performance. Maylis didn't look at me with sadness. She looked at me with certainty, like she was walking in to collect something she believed I owed her. When we entered the courtroom, Maylis spoke first. She described me as unstable, controlling, unpredictable. She said I used money to punish her. She said I refused communication. She said I couldn't lead and that Jacian needed a real structure. Renita nodded at each sentence like punctuation. Maylis didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She performed calm victimhood with the same practiced tone she used in my kitchen. Then the judge asked for specifics. Dates, examples, patterns. Maylis gave vague stories and emotional language. It sounded convincing until it had to become measurable. Adrian stood and did not match Maylis' energy. No speeches, no outrage, just calm, clean presentation. Your Honor, she said, We have documentation that directly contradicts the petitioner's narrative and demonstrates a pattern of financial manipulation, custodial interference, and intent to misrepresent. Then she started laying out the timeline, one piece at a time, like building a wall. Bank alerts, transfer records, screenshots, school portal changes, the lease emails, the property record attempt, the HR concern report with timing logged. Maylee's jaw tightened. Not panic, control. But you can't control paper once it's admitted. The moment that shifted the room wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Adrian played the voice note. Maylee's laughing. If he leaves, I'll make sure he leaves with nothing. The courtroom didn't gasp. The judge didn't make a speech. But the temperature changed. Because it wasn't a husband describing pain. It was the wife's own voice describing intent. Maylee stared ahead like she could outlast the sound. Renita's face went still. Vontae looked down. Maylee's didn't apologize. She didn't soften. She tried to pivot, saying it was taken out of context, that she was venting. But context is exactly what a timeline provides. Adrian then introduced the text message chain where Maylee's told Tashi she was setting Kellen up to look unstable. It wasn't one message. It was multiple, spaced over weeks, describing strategy, how to bait me, how to provoke, how to frame my calm as cold and my hurt as instability. Maylee's tried to say it was sarcasm, but sarcasm doesn't look like planning. Sarcasm doesn't line up with bank transfers timed to paydays and property contact changes and school portal edits. Sarcasm doesn't show up as coordination with a mother and brother who suddenly check on your home like your tenant. The judge asked Maylee's direct questions about the money. Why were there transfers within hours of payroll deposits? Why was there a payment labeled retainer while she claimed she had no private funds? Why were household expenses missing while she claimed Kellen controlled everything? Maylee's responded with confidence, but her answers were slippery. She refused remorse even when pressed. She refused accountability even when the records were clear. She kept trying to return a performance. I felt unsafe. I felt trapped. But the judge kept returning to data. And data does not bend because someone believes their story deserves to win. The connected twist, the one Maylee's truly didn't see coming, was the paper she tried to get me to sign. Adrian presented the draft power of attorney with Maylee's handwriting in the margins, the email where Renita asked if she got him to sign, and a note from Maylee's to herself saved in a cloud backup that listed tasks. Get signature. Update school. Move funds. Control narrative. It wasn't a conspiracy theory anymore. It was documented intent. Maylee's face tightened harder, like she was trying to hold her pride in place. Renita stared forward, lips pressed. Nobody apologized. Nobody softened. But their confidence started cracking at the edges, not emotionally, but strategically. The ruling came without drama. Primary custody to me. Structured visitation to Maylee's. Financial protections to prevent unauthorized access to certain accounts. Clear communication guidelines, written, trackable, neutral. The judge didn't lecture, didn't scold, just set boundaries Maylee's couldn't charm her way around. Boundaries that didn't care about tone, beauty, or performance. When the judge read the custody structure, Maylee's didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She looked at me like I'd stolen something from her. Like her loss was my offense. In the hallway afterward, Maylee's walked past me like I was still nothing and hissed, "You think you won?" Her eyes were hard. No remorse. No regret. Renita brushed my shoulder on purpose as she passed, like a final insult. Vontae muttered something under his breath that sounded like temporary. Tashi's voice came through a phone speaker as Maylee's answered and said, "We'll fix it." They still believed life was a story you could rewrite if you spoke loudly enough. But court orders don't respond to volume. They respond to compliance. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't trapped inside Maylee's version of reality. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post. I didn't call mutual friends to tell my side. I went home, picked up Jason from school, and made dinner. That night we sat at the table and ate like the world hadn't cracked open. Jason talked about a class project. I nodded and asked questions. I didn't mention court. I didn't mention Maylee's, because my victory wasn't about humiliating her. It was about stabilizing my son. That was the private kind of success nobody claps for. It looks like quiet. It looks like homework. It looks like bedtime on time. Moving out happened soon after. Not because I was running, because the order made it possible to do it cleanly. I found a small, neat place in Laurel, close enough to keep Jason in the same school district. It wasn't fancy. It was peaceful. The first night there, I sat on the edge of the bed in the silence and realized my shoulders weren't up around my ears. No phone buzzing behind me. No smirking commentary. No waiting for a trap question. Just quiet. It felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious, like my nervous system didn't know what to do without conflict. Then I slept for 8 hours straight and woke up feeling like my body had been released from a cage. The routine became my therapy. Dinner at the table. Homework at the same time each night. Clothes laid out the night before. Saturday mornings at the park. Library trips. Grocery runs with a list. I started working out again, not to prove anything, but because I needed my body to feel like mine. I stopped skipping meals. I started reading again. The way I used to before my life became nothing but survival. And the more consistent my home became, the more I saw Jason's behavior shift. He stopped hovering for cues. He stopped watching me like I was temporary. He started relaxing into the idea that his father's calm wasn't weakness. It was structure. Maylise didn't take the ruling as information. She took it as an insult. She kept trying to pressure me outside the boundaries. She'd show up late for visitation and then accuse me of controlling the schedule. She'd send messages designed to provoke. Still playing victim? Still pretending you're the hero? How does it feel to steal a child from his mother? I didn't respond to the insults. I responded to logistics only. Date, time, location, confirmation. Adrian told me consistency was a shield, so I used it. Every attempt to drag me into emotion became another record of her unwillingness to co-parent respectfully. The next twist came from Maylise's own overconfidence. She tried to open a line of credit using the old joint information. It didn't go through because the protections and alerts were in place. But the attempt created a record, an unmistakable sign that she was still reaching for access she no longer had. When the bank called to confirm suspicious activity, I answered calmly, confirmed I was not authorizing anything, and requested the incident report. Then I emailed Adrian. Maylise didn't know that her attempts to control were creating more documentation. She thought she was still behind the scenes, still capable of bending reality. But every system she tried to manipulate left a footprint. Renita tried too. She contacted the school, claiming she was handling pickup changes. The school called me because my name was now clearly listed as primary custody. I went in person, provided the court order, updated permissions, and spoke with the administration calmly. No drama, just clarity. The secretary looked relieved, like she'd been waiting for an adult to stop the tug of war. When I walked out, I realized something. Maylise and Renita weren't used to boundaries that didn't fold under pressure. They were used to people getting tired and giving in. But I wasn't negotiating my son's stability anymore. That wasn't pride. That was responsibility. Months passed. The noise died down in some places and got louder in others. Mutual friends started noticing Maylise's stories didn't match reality. She'd claim she was being blocked from her child, yet she'd skip visitation or show up late. She'd claim Kellen was financially abusive, yet she'd post about shopping hauls and trips while asking for help with basics. I didn't correct her publicly. I didn't need to. The truth was already written where it mattered. And slowly, the people who could see clearly started stepping back from her performance. That was karma too, quiet, social, realistic. Not a public downfall, just credibility draining away. My private success grew in ways I didn't advertise. At work, I earned a promotion because I was steady, because I handled conflict without chaos. I took a certification course in the evenings after Jason went to sleep. I started building a savings buffer. I didn't buy flashy things. I bought peace, a reliable car, a better mattress, a small emergency fund. I took Jason on simple day trips, museums in D.C., the zoo, a weekend in Annapolis where we ate ice cream by the water. He took pictures and laughed in a way I hadn't heard in a long time. That laughter felt like proof that leaving wasn't abandonment. Staying in disrespect would have been. The hardest part of rebuilding wasn't money or schedules. It was retraining my mind to stop bracing for humiliation. For years, I had lived like every conversation could turn into a verdict. I flinched internally at small things. Tone changes, long silences, someone saying my name sharply. I started seeing a therapist quietly in Greenbelt, not because I wanted to talk about feelings like Melis mocked, but because I wanted to lead myself into health. Therapy didn't make me dramatic. It made me honest. It helped me name what happened without turning it into a performance. It helped me understand that calm isn't the absence of emotion. It's the decision not to let emotion steer the car. One evening, Jason came home for visitation and said, softly, "Mom said you took her life." My chest tightened, but I kept my voice steady. I asked what he meant. He said she told him, "Your dad thinks he can lead now, but he's just lucky." I looked at my son's face and saw him trying to carry adult bitterness in a child's body. I told him, adults say things when they're hurt, but you don't have to carry it. Then I made him a snack, and we sat together while he did homework. I didn't counterattack. I didn't insult Melis. I just kept the home stable. That stability became my quiet rebuttal. Melis never apologized. Not privately. Not through an attorney. Not in a softened message at midnight. She stayed consistent in her refusal of remorse, like she believed apology was surrender. But refusal has consequences. The more she refused accountability, the more she lost the one thing she could have protected, her credibility with institutions that matter. Courts, schools, banks, employers. Karma wasn't a dramatic collapse. It was a series of locked doors. Access denied. Claims questioned. Patterns noted. And each locked door forced her to face something she hated. She couldn't talk her way into control anymore. People asked me sometimes if I hated her. I understood why they asked. Stories like mine usually end in rage, or revenge, or a public victory speech. But I didn't hate Melis. Hate is heavy. Hate keeps you tied to the person who tried to break you. I didn't want to be tied to her anymore. I wanted to be free. So I told people the truth in a simple sentence. I don't hate her. I just don't carry her. Because carrying her meant carrying her version of me, weak, lost, emotional. I wasn't that man. I was a man who learned to document, plan, and protect his child without screaming. She said I couldn't lead a home. And for a long time, I tried to prove her wrong by working myself into the ground, chasing respect from people determined to deny it. Then I learned what leadership actually looks like. It looks like restraint. It looks like preparation. It looks like keeping records when someone is trying to rewrite reality. It looks like choosing a peaceful exit instead of a loud fight. I didn't run. I exited, calm, prepared, documented. And the life I built on the other side doesn't need Melis' approval to stand. It stands because I finally led the only thing I could always control, myself. If you enjoyed the story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.